the Alps and the Dolomites, you have Samaria and Judea. And this is the West Bank. And this little blue patch here is what Gershon Masika was talking about, the 70% of Israel's population and the 80% of her industrial base.
The country of Tel Aviv.
It's the shtetl of Tel Aviv, I call it. And so really between this point here, hold a second. Sorry. Between this point here and this point here is 10 miles. That's the green line. And this is what Gershon Masika was saying about the 35 miles to 40 miles of the West Bank. So without the Alps and the Dolomites, or Samaria and Judea, this is where you would be when you started a war. Now, this is my little Katusha rocket piece. Has everyone heard about my Katusha rocket piece? Okay, so it's in the materials, but this is the scoop. The same way they've smuggled Katusha rockets into the Gaza Strip, if they get a demilitarized Palestinian state where there are no Israeli border guards, no Israeli internal security, they can smuggle the same things in and fire them into this densely populated area. The difference is, when they fire them from the Gaza Strip, it's really like firing into a relatively empty area. But if they fired from here, from the West Bank, Samaria, into Tel Aviv, it's like firing from Brooklyn into Manhattan. Now, I would love to explain, and I have explained very, very little bit in the materials, how there are additional arguments, because this really doesn't get to the demographic threat that they say you have to give up the West Bank. But if anyone has any more questions, they should call AFC or call me. My information's on the number. And I also have videos. I was just on Eric Steckelbeck, so you can sort of get an idea of it. But that's the one vignette. You have to make Judea and Samaria relevant to your audience or to your person. But now, here's the second vignette, anecdote. So, and everyone, this is going to be important with this sheet. So I walk into a congressional office, and this congressional office happens to be of a congressman who is very important for the budget. And I walk in, and I sit down, and she looks at me, and she said, "The congressman runs a very tight ship. I'm the only person in this office that handles foreign affairs. I know nothing about the West Bank, Israel. You have 10 minutes, go." So she thinks I'm gonna rush. So I don't rush. I say, "Okay, so you wanna understand why it's important to the congressman?" She says, "Yes." So I take out this sheet, and I say, "Okay, on this map here, you've got 2,000 miles by 2,000 miles. And that's essentially the Middle East. That doesn't include Nigeria, India, Pakistan, Malaysia. That's got another billion Muslims. Just in this 2,000 by 2,000 mile span. If you look at that little blue line over there, see that blue line in the upper left? Okay. So there's about 370 million Muslims in this bottom part of that rectangle. And in the upper part, you've got 11 million Greeks. And the only non-Muslim country between 370 million Muslims and 11 million Greeks that happens to be a NATO country is Israel. And you know what? If something happens to Israel, and God forbid it's harmed, you're going to be getting that 370 million Muslims with all the oil in the world coming into Greece, which is a NATO country.
Isn't that our provision to want to make peace with them?
Listen, I'm all for answering questions after. It's actually a reason to understand that there are differentiations in the 370 million. And what you should do is you should try to understand the countries and the populations that will benefit from an Israeli friendship, like certain areas that are around that are now partnering with Israel, but that's really a secondary issue, which I can talk to you at length afterwards. But the issue here is, I said to her, so if God forbid something happens to Israel, you're going to have 370 million Muslims, led by Iran, coming at a NATO country called Greece. How much do you think you're going to have to put in the United States defense budget in years 2, 3, 4, and 5 to budget for a military defense of a core NATO country against this kind of threat? She looks at me and she says, you just bought another half an hour. Okay? So the key here is and we have, and one of the things that I wanted to talk about here is the big lie is that Israel is isolated, and it's becoming more isolated if we don't make an accommodation and give up the West. It's the exact opposite. Greece and Cyprus now understand the relevance and urgency of a safe and secure Israel. And in today's paper, in the Sunday Times, Saudi Arabia, believe it or not, appears to be also understanding the security value of Israel. So, again, what you need to do as a pro-Israel advocate is learn the facts. Call me, call anybody on this panel,